Welcome to the program. I'm Gigi Kopelak. My guest today, Ginny Fox, will be in an exhibition at the Rockefeller State Park Preserve. The exhibition opens on July 21st, and I'm very glad to have you here today with me. Ginny, welcome.
Thank you.
I'd like to just, because we're talking about the exhibition, show one of the pieces that is going to be in there. And then we'll go back and talk about how you got to this place. So I know you don't use titles. So
No.
this is going to be hard for me.
Okay.
How do you define your work?
Well, the different bodies of work that I have produced over the years, I refer to them more by their materials, because I'm very material oriented. So the first image that you will be looking at will be acrylic paint on acrylic panels. And
when you say acrylic panels, in other words, they're transparent.
They are transparent, and they actually have a bit of depth. They're about an inch and a half deep, so they do have a presence away from the wall. They're not
Do you
flat.
paint on the sides also? Or
Yes.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
So no one would really know that they're transparent.
That's correct, except for knowing that they can see. It becomes sort of translucent by the layering of the colors that I use.
Okay.
And I paint on the front and the back to some degree to give it the depth that it has.
I assume you've experimented with this process and found that this gives your paint a better something or other of what you're looking for?
Yes. The acrylic paint on the acrylic panels, actually, the panels themselves are non-porous, so the colors, I'm essentially mixing my paint as I'm painting.
Okay.
It stays right on the surface. And it becomes a very exciting process for me because of that.
Sounds really great. Well, let's find out how you got to that, because let's look at an earlier piece when you were working with something else. You were working with the fabric, I think?
With fabric. Well, before that I was working with branches, organic material, and waxed linen and wrapped pieces, and I was actually doing more organic forms with organic materials. And then
were they hanging on the wall?
They were mostly. Previous to that, I had done some that were freestanding or supported by a metal stand.
So they were very abstract shapes.
Yes.
Or were you concentrating on the nature part of it?
The nature part. I was integrating handmade paper with branches.
Okay.
And then that evolved. It's all been an evolution, of course.
Of course.
To using mixed media over an aluminum substructure, fabric with very fine pigment and glass beads and sand and a lot of texture.
So the fabric had the texture on it?
Well, the fabric was a metallic silk that had other materials painted over it. Okay. And they were very lightweight and yet defied their real weight. They looked heavier than they were. They alluded to stone, something heavier than that.
Very interesting. So how big would this first one be, for instance, this triangular piece?
I say that's fairly small. It's about 12, 14 inches.
And then the next one, which is, so in these you're really almost concentrating on geometric shapes, or you're just building up to geometry? Or?
I was building up to geometry, yes. I was starting, my work is always on a fairly subconscious level. I wasn't really quite sure where I was going with it shape-wise, but I was trying to get to some more structured format. I was sort of in a loosely defined format before, and I think I was trying to focus more on the surface and the layers beneath, and trying to achieve some sort of mystery with that. And in that next image of the more what I call an envelope piece, because it is folded over and it looks like there's something inside that you can't quite get to.
I do see the mystery in it. I do.
Yeah.
I understand that. You want to open that up. But you can't, can you?
No.
There's no, it's all really attached and tight. And so this one also, so you've painted this, I assume, because it's sort of two triangles that come together in different colors, or is that two different
No,
fabrics?
actually it's actually one complete piece. It's just,
no, I understand that, but are you painting on the fabric to give it the two tones?
At painting, yes, and putting other materials on it as well. Pigment, like I say, glass beads, sand, variety of materials.
Yeah, you're pasting them all on, and
with acrylic gel. It goes. It all becomes one material after a while.
Okay, so are you working on the fabric first and then wrapping it?
Both, a little of both.
Okay.
Yeah.
So you're really
I'm trying to think back too because that was a while ago.
Oh,
but
was it?
Yeah.
All right, so then let's go to the next one, which are encaustic now.
Yes.
So that was a whole series. The fabric was a
Yes.
whole series, and then you went into something different.
Yes, I had been seeing the material of encaustic, which is basically, it's an ancient material. It's powdered pigments, colors, natural colors that are essentially cooked in beeswax and then applied to a surface. In the case of the series that I did, it was on wood, very totemic shaped pieces. I had been viewing works that were made out of encaustic for a while and was very intrigued by the translucency of the color, the layers that could be achieved, and just the beauty of the surface. And I took a class, fell in love with the material, and created a whole body of work. The pieces that you see are just 3 of, I think it was a series of 30 to 32 pieces that were installed together. And what happened was, unfortunately, I developed a health problem from working with the encaustic, which can happen with different materials.
Yes, some of these things are really toxic, I know.
They can be, and everybody has a sensitivity to different things. Unfortunately, mine was to that, and that was my limited edition of encaustic.
Had you planned, though, that they were all going to be one of a piece, or 32 together, or whatever you said, 30 pieces, or?
You know what happened? I just started making them, and I couldn't stop. I decided I wanted them to look like they were related to one another, but not exactly the same.
Okay.
And such as the example of this image, which the bands of color don't exactly line up. They can when they're installed, or they don't have to be. But the part that was conscious in my thinking and constructing of them was to make them look as if they could stand on their own as individual elements, but that they were part of a bigger structure, an unknown bigger structure.
And how big are these?
Those are about 24 inches by 4 inches.
Okay. And they hang on the wall also?
Yes.
Oh, yeah, they're not freestanding. And are you designing or planning when you make these for a specific place, or are you, like when you have a show, do you know that like this wall is I'm going to put this amount of pieces on this wall, or are you just creating and then?
I'm just creating, but then once they are created, I really do care a lot about how the pieces relate to the space that they're in.
Okay.
So that in many instances, including with the encaustics, they can be installed horizontally or vertically. They can relate more to the corner of a room than to the center of a room.
So they change.
They
can make them change.
Yes,
that's amazing.
An architectural reference or relationship to the building that it's in.
So you could make a whole new design with these pieces if you
wanted. With a lot
it.
of them, yes.
Yeah. No, that's great. That's amazing. So what did you do then? You can't
so
do the encaustic.
Yes.
What do
well,
you do?
I decided. Well, I was very sad for a while, but I decided I had to find something else. The one beautiful thing that happened from the encaustic is it opened up a whole other realm for me, which was a real deep appreciation of color and its intrinsic properties to whatever material it was in. And I experimented for a while. I did some little plexiglass pieces that also hung on the wall. And then eventually that led to the acrylic panel pieces, such as the first one that you saw, the blue panels. And
but before we got to that, there's a couple of things that happen in between that, right? We have the acrylic on acrylic.
That's
oh, okay, right.
Right, and those are pieces that are attached.
Okay.
They look like they are sort of disparate, not meant to be together. On the other hand, they are together.
Okay, so in this case, they don't come apart, and you can't play with them and put them in different places.
It's not intended that way. They are clipped from behind in a way that I could, if I needed to, shift them. But I did these in separate pieces, and then afterwards thought out how I wanted to put them together as one piece.
Interesting. So you don't do them as a piece in the beginning. You do them separately.
Separately.
Yeah. And then do you change them when you put them together?
Sometimes.
Yeah.
Sometimes.
Yeah. All right, so we're looking at one, and then there's another one here that's very green. It feels so different because I feel like a lot of your colors are very grayed, and then this green really pops out.
There were a few. Yeah, there's always a few. I've even been known to have some red ones. Red's not usually a color in my palette very often. Yeah, I mean that bright green occurs in nature. I think they're all natural. They're all nature colors. They're all earth tones in one way or another.
So okay, so we're working with geometry,
Yes.
and you're working with nature. That's the colors. Even the gray one, the next one is...
Actually, it shows as gray here, but it's really more green. It's more of a mossy
Okay.
green.
It's a mossy green.
In fact, none of these that we have here are gray. They're pretty much they all have blues or greens in them.
Okay,
The ones
so
that look gray.
doesn't always work when you take a photograph.
No,
of
it
them.
doesn't.
Yeah. Yeah.
And
But you're very interested in the process of it. So I'm interested to hear you say that they're nature, because you have an idea about nature, but you're more interested in how the process when you're working on it.
yeah, and also what I would, I guess, call the manipulation of it, because to me they're just as much about what you might extract from the center of the earth as a piece of rock or a stone that you would find walking along the beach, as they are about the sky and the trees all sort of merged together. They're internal, they're external. But I guess in my coming to this point of them being within a square or rectangular shape, I was just looking for some format for myself to explore the surfaces and the underlying surfaces and not have to think more about the organic shape or referencing anything else.
I see. I get it.
Just sort of reducing it to that in a way.
But so, for instance, the next one, to me, it's very brown. I don't know if that is also the correct color.
It's brown, and you're talking about with the three. It's brown with a sort of pale blue band going through it.
So, to me, it's a reverse of the Earth. You know, you would see the sky at the top and the brown at the bottom. Yeah. Is that and so? Are you being inspired by dirt? I don't know how else to say that, but and then the sky colors?
As much as one as the other, and I guess as you well put it, it's playing around with that. What you would normally think of as the water and the sky, or the earth and the sky. Turning it around might make you think of it differently. It might make you think about striations in a rock or something else altogether.
Yeah. And so when you're not doing this consciously, though.
I would say semi.
Semi-consciously.
Yeah.
So that you might walk along the beach, let's say, and see the sand and the shells and not know that you're going to be inspired by that?
Exactly.
Okay.
It goes in there. It stays there. It does all kinds of things. And when I'm in my studio, I don't know how it's always going to come out.
Right. So do you make an intention to travel places so that you would see things, or is it just based on your experience, like of your own, you know? So, you know, you would make a trip, like for instance this year I'm going to be going to Acadia. I'm going to be artist in residence in Acadia, and I can't wait to get up there. It's filled with rocks, and I know it's going to change my work.
Yes.
I'm hoping it's going to change. I'm hoping I'm going to be affected by that. So I think that everything we do affects us.
Absolutely.
You know,
absolutely.
So I'm just wondering, do you make a conscious effort to find that, or you just...
Well, I love going to the beach and walking in the woods. So whether I take a trip far away or do that closer to home, it doesn't matter. I just make a point of that's a very important part of my life.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, it does make fun. All right, and then I think we have one more on that series, which is I like this one a lot. It's sort of a rusty color. And then you have only one extra piece on this one. The others seem to be three.
Yes.
So there's no formula. You can have two, you can have three, you can have four, you can have whatever.
Again, I'm sorry.
Have you ever gotten really big and gotten many on it, or is it mostly two or three?
The ones that are attached with slightly different sizes of panels together, no, they're all within that very small to medium size.
Okay.
Once I broke away from that to the next series, then they started to change in size a little bit more.
Yeah. Could you talk a little bit about your background, like what it was that got you first into the nature and this idea, or?
It's always been. I guess when I was in college, and I was studying studio art at NYU many years ago.
Yeah. In the city.
Yes, in the city. There I was. I guess it was while I was doing independent study with painting that paint was just not enough for me, and I was thankfully encouraged by my teacher at that time to explore other materials, and I was working with branches then and feathers and animal skins, as a matter of fact, and eventually I sort of came away from that a little bit and did paper, worked with paper.
So paper was the medium, colored paper, or?
What happened was I ended up taking a workshop in paper making and
Okay.
doing some handmade paper, because again, I think I was, even then, even way back then, wanting to experience what it was like to be right at the root of the material.
You're interested in that process?
Yes, process
Right.
again. Yeah.
Process again, yeah. That's fun, handmade paper, I
It
think.
was wonderful. It
Yeah.
was.
And were you
really-
making structures out of them, or were you using just the paper?
Not really structures, but, well, actually that's not true. I did do a series of handmade paper attached to branches, real branches, so that they ended up looking almost like enlarged leaves.
Okay.
But thinking back on it now, that was just a little too literal.
Okay.
Not where I wanted to really be going.
Right.
So.
You want to get away from the literal. So is that one of the reasons that you don't like to name your work? Do you want
Yes.
people to be interpreting what they see?
Yes. I want to leave it open to whatever people do want to see, and I suppose I could name them, but I'm not thinking of anything very specific when I'm making them, or even when they're complete. So I do like to leave it open to interpretation.
Even when you're finished, do you look at it and say, oh, I know what that's about, and I could name it, but I won't? No?
No, it just, I feel like I'm so non-verbal with the work that the work has to speak for itself, and
Yeah.
since it's not coming from a place, like I know with a lot of artists, from poetry or from a particular literary source or mythology, it's just not coming from that kind of place.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. I was at the Met yesterday and I saw an artist who does landscapes, and he's copying the exact landscapes of Thomas Cole, but then he's adding something to them. Hannock, I think his name was. It was very interesting. Yeah, that artist. So you're eliminating, you're rejecting all of this. All about the city, all about NYU.
Well, you know, I suppose in the fact that they're even in a geometric structure, it somehow references structures, you know, man-made structures.
That's true. Yeah.
And it gives that dimension to it that clearly, I mean, not that these would look like they were very exactly of the natural world, but there's no way that they could be, given
that they're so
geometric.
Right.
So you're very aware of the fact that there's a person's hand involved in this.
Right. Yeah. Very interesting. And then you started to get into not attached.
Yes.
Is that the most recent work?
No.
Okay, good. So we have more to go. Good. That's great.
Yeah. But ever since then, they've been non-attached. Let's put it that way. Yeah.
Okay. And so this next one is that 2 or 3 pieces?
That's 3 pieces. They're, in this particular photograph, they're not evenly spaced. It's one of those pieces that has some possibilities. They can be very close together. They can be further apart. I wasn't as interested in putting things together in a very defined way. Again, I wanted more of an open-ended interpretation.
Okay.
And more flexibility, so that these could even be stacked vertically or stacked horizontally, as long as the bands of color look like they're somewhat connecting together. Because
all right, so that's interesting. So when they're hanging in a show, who decides that? Would you let the curator decide that they can go vertically or horizontally, or would you decide that?
I think it depends on the show. It depends on the curator.
Yeah.
As long as they understand the thinking behind it, that they shouldn't be spread miles apart or split up in any way. Depending on the piece, I think I would leave it up to the curator.
Yeah.
It's okay.
That's terrific. So the next one, I feel, of course it's similar, but the colors, now in the first one, the colors are all monochromatic. Well, in the same family.
In the same family.
Right, and then this next one, you're changing the colors. You're working from these bright oranges to a darkness. Yeah. So.
Yes, and it's actually, that particular piece is a lot smaller. Each of these little panels is about 4 by 6 inches.
Oh, interesting.
Even though they have depth to them.
Okay.
So, in a sense, I consider them more jewel-like. They are more like something you would pick up and hold in your hand that you find.
Yeah, I see that. And then the next one seems really large. It goes on.
No, actually, it's not. It's, again, that's deceiving because of the perspective, I think, in the photograph. Those are also about the same size.
Okay, but there's more of them?
There are more of them, and they're spread out a little bit more in that photo.
But they are also all of a piece?
Yes.
The one.
Yes.
So would it be possible that you could put them all together when you're showing them, so there would be a whole line of them, all different series? No. Okay.
With the encaustic pieces that work that way, but these, even though you may not realize that, with most of these that you have 3 in a grouping or even 2 in a grouping, they are the same colors in different order, applied in a different order. And the fascination for me and the excitement for me is in seeing what that produces when I layer them in a different order. And as you can see, they look in some instances like they're totally different colors, but they're not.
Okay, explain. Yeah, I'm confused a little bit. So,
Yeah.
so on the piece itself,
Yes.
you're layering the same colors in a different way. Is that what you're saying?
Yes, in most of these that you see.
And so, and because of the, so what you might have a gray, a dark underneath and a light on top, or you might have a light underneath and a dark on top.
Exactly.
But the colors are exactly the same, and then they come. That's fun.
It is.
Yeah,
it
yeah,
is,
yeah.
and it's really the
Yeah.
most exciting part of it for me. And as you said before, it's the process.
It's the process and seeing what will happen with the paint and with the background, and how, that's great.
Sometimes I think I'm going to end up with a particular color, and it's totally different, and I just go with it. And
what do you have to like it?
Of course.
Or,
yeah.
Oh, okay. Yeah. So you will say, oh, that didn't come out the way I wanted
right,
it.
I'll just keep working on it.
Okay. Yeah. And then the next one is more of more monochromatic again. Yeah.
In the greens. Green
the
tones
greens.
mostly, yeah, green and white.
Yeah, I don't know that you can see the greens. And that's fascinating to me. So are you working with 2 colors, 3 colors? Does it matter?
It doesn't really, usually it's 3 or more.
Okay. And
I
you're
like
not
the
making
number 3.
and you're not making mud.
No.
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 Because you're working with glazes.
No, it's just acrylic paint that I apply with a rag.
Okay.
That's it.
Yeah.
They get rubbed in.
Well,
very often they're let's see.
No, I was going to say you make it sound easy. That's it. But you know, this has taken years to perfect this process, and I'm sure it's not easy. And it's got your hand in it, and they're beautiful. And then the next one that's we calling not attached. It feels like it's attached.
Yeah, they're very close together in this photo. Yeah.
Yeah. Touching or?
No. There's always a space.
There's always a space. Not like the ones that are attached.
Correct.
Where there is no space.
Correct.
Okay. And that's important? Is that important?
Yeah. Yeah,
Okay.
I think again, going back to the concept of these are individual elements, such as in this piece, the blue piece with the 2 panels, that could stand on their own, but actually are much more interesting when they're relating to each other.
Okay. But you would never show them on their own.
No.
Let's say someone came and said, I want to buy one.
No.
No, can't do it.
No. The idea that they're slightly different, they're not exactly the same, they're using the same colors in a different order, and that they look like they might have been lifted out of the same section of the earth, so to speak, for lack of a better reference. And what they are like together is what interests me.
Okay. And now the most recent pieces you're changing a little bit. Let's look at them. The first one here, that you're working on clayboard?
Well, actually, that green, the 3-panel green piece is still the acrylic.
Right, I think we talked about that one. That was the one I said it looks like it's one piece.
Oh, I thought you were, I thought you were referring to the 5
No,
panels.
so then we're up to this sort of orangey piece.
Yes.
And that's not on acrylic anymore.
That's correct. That's acrylic paint, but it's on clayboard, which is essentially wood that's been industrially coated with many layers of gesso that have been very, very smoothed.
Okay.
Smoother than you or I could ever get them.
Right.
And it essentially serves as the same kind of mostly non-porous surface for me that the acrylic panels did. It still has a little bit of porousness so that it eats a little bit of the paint while I'm painting, but not a whole lot.
And this is also thick, 2 inches thick?
The wood panels themselves are cradle panels. Yeah, the clay part of it is only on the top.
Okay, but are you painting the sides?
I am. I'm gessoing the sides as well so that it
so that
does
it has
go.
that smoothness again. Yeah. But you're doing something else in these. You're striating these or something. Or
there's a little bit of different markings going on. There's a couple of different bodies of work even within the clayboards. Some of them are more of an atmospheric or smudgier effect, and the others are have more linear elements going on in them.
Okay. And so let's look at this next one. This sort of gray and beigey kind of. I hate to use that word. I apologize.
They're more. That's okay. It's hard. Again, it's hard to see.
It's like when people would come to my class and they say, "I love peach," and I go, "What color is peach?
Right.
There's red, there's green, there's yellows. What is?"
It is hard to talk about.
So I don't want to say beige, but I.
No, it's not. But it's got an ochre.
Okay.
And sort of gold and brown.
So yellow, more in the yellow family. Yellow
browns
ochre?
and ochres.
Oh,
yeah.
okay. I consider ochre a yellow, but all right.
Yeah. Well, then it was my mistake. Probably
Umber.
more umber.
Okay.
Yeah, probably more umber.
All right. And that has, so are you scratching out?
A little bit, just a little bit on some of these.
Okay.
I was scratching out more on the acrylic pieces, actually. There was a little bit of that going on. But these, yes, the imperfection of the surface.
And is this just part of the process again, just to see what happens when you do it, or is there any kind of thinking behind this?
I think, again, to have reference to nature and the imperfections and time-worn kind of look to things.
Oh, okay.
Having had a history of having been somewhere else before and not knowing where it's going. And
all right.
all
But
that.
you're not thinking words or
No.
Scratch marks or any kind of graffiti or anything
No,
like
no,
that?
nothing with
nothing.
again, nothing with any literal
You're
reference.
still-
No, just to give it a worn,
Okay.
aged surface.
Okay. And then this next one, this gray one, is that one piece or is that, oh, no, two really long pieces here? Number
That
R?
one. Okay,
Yeah.
that one it's actually blue and black and white.
Okay.
Hmm.
And it's two pieces, is it?
It's two panels. They're each
Two
about
panels.
12 by, I think they're 12 by 36.
Oh, those are very big for you
inches.
now.
Yeah,
Now
they're a little bit bigger.
Is this the first time you're working big?
That brown piece that you were just talking about is
Okay.
actually even bigger.
The horizontal one?
Mm-hmm. Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah, I've been doing a few
Well,
more.
but together it's bigger.
Together it's bigger, yes.
Yeah, but now this you're saying is 36 inches and it feels like it's one, each one is 36
Yes,
inches?
by 12, I believe.
Yeah, so
yeah.
that feels much, I mean, it feels big when you put them all together, but now,
Mhm.
you know, each one being bigger feels
Yes.
like a big change.
It is, but I still go back to working small as well. I don't get too big.
Okay.
If they get large, it's only because I've added more multiple panels, and then it becomes a large piece.
Right,
I can't
right.
think in terms of working on a large surface. I don't know why. I guess maybe my hand just doesn't feel like it's in control as much when I have to span a very long
Yeah.
panel.
Uh-huh.
And I work on a table. I don't work mostly on the wall.
Well, I think it's a totally different approach when you're working large to small.
Yes.
I mean, even if you were to take this and say, well, this is a maquette, I can make it 6 feet, it wouldn't work. It doesn't work.
No,
You can't
no,
do it.
no.
I can't do it. I know certainly people use maquettes, but I find that the process is so different, the idea, the way you're approaching it.
The whole sensibility.
The sensibility.
Yeah.
Good word.
Yeah.
All right, and then this last one is very interesting. This looks more like a fabric piece, which is almost back to the beginning.
Yes,
You know,
well, I think we all somehow work in a spiral. I'm convinced of that. You think you're moving away from something, and then there it comes up again in some
yeah,
other
that's true.
form.
We never lose it. It's
No, there's
it's
always something there that needs to be explored in a different way
Yeah.
as you enter different phases of your
Right,
life. It is
right.
interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I have some pieces now that I have more of that reference going on there, and it's fine. It's fine. Hopefully they have more than just that, but yeah.
Yeah, that's great. All right, I just want to do this last one, which shows the work in an installation.
Mm-hmm.
All right, and then I can't believe we're up to the time. It's been so enjoyable talking to you. I'd
Likewise.
love to. I'm waiting to see the show, which opens again, let's say, July 31st.
Actually, it's, I believe, the 20...
No, I think it's,
31st? Okay.
well, my information, July 31st. We have to know when the reception is, which is August 2nd, from 1 to 3:30
Correct.
at the Rockefeller State Park Preserve Gallery, and the show will be there until September 27th.
That's right, yes.
Yeah, and I wish you all kinds of luck.
Thank
Thank you
you
so much for coming.
Thank you for having me.
Thank you. And thank you for watching.